Welcome back. We're in class 64 of Faith and Confidence, Torah coaching. And last time we began to speak about what we call conscious determination, which is the process by which our consciousness determines how much of the goodness of reality is going to come out. And it's a process. That's the most surprising thing. It's not just wishful thinking, meaning that it requires us to go through some preliminary stages before we can open our eyes and see the goodness of reality coming out. And that's maybe the most common thing in Judaism, which is that there are no free lunches. That we came here to work in the sense of even bringing out what is natural takes time and takes effort. In the same way that I think most people would say that, growing produce in a field is a natural process. You're not doing anything more than what nature is already able to do. You're causing the field, the ground, the earth to nourish some produce. And yet it requires a lot of effort on the part of the farmer, on the part of the person who's doing it. In the Tanya, we find this idea in relation to what we call consciousness. By consciousness, we mean being conscious of the divine. Being conscious of the divine really means that a person feels that his life force is coming from above, and that it's not just inherently inside his body, as it were, but rather there's a flow from above that is giving me the ability to move my hand, that is filling me with a feeling of life inside me. So even though that's how the world is, it requires a lot of conscious effort to get to the stage in which you can actually feel this. Because most people can't feel this. They cannot experience divinity just by being awake, just by being alive. I could do a mind trick on myself and say, whatever I feel as my life force, that itself is the divine. That's okay. That's not wrong. But it's not yet the feeling that we associate with being conscious of the divine. Because even though I'm privileged to feel that in myself, I'm privileged to feel the life force in myself, I'm not as privileged when it comes to feeling the life force permeating everything else. I don't have that special point of view that I do regarding myself. And so, even though I might be able to tell myself that what I feel permeating through me is divine force, not just life, when it comes to other things, other people around me, the animals, the plants, the earth, I'm not able to sense the same thing I'm able to sense about myself. And if that's the case, then I'm missing something. Then I still haven't been able to truly grasp the meaning of life force being divine. So somebody might object and say, if I'm looking at somebody on the street and I don't feel that the fact that they're alive is an expression of the divine, that's not a drawback. That just means that I don't yet have the capacity to really connect to this person. What is that? What am I trying to say? That if I would speak to them, I should be able to feel that what is animating them, that what is coming out of their mouth is coming from above, from the divine. And the classic example of this type of consciousness is in the book of Samuel, when David is running away from Avshalom, from his son, who rebelled against him. He encounters a man by the name of Shimei ben Gera, who curses him. And Yoav, who is David's cousin, wants to kill Shimei because he is a rebel, because he's cursing the king. But David says to him, let him be, because God told him to curse. God told him to curse, meaning, in other words, that even though you might feel that he's just a free agent, just a person running around here, I feel in his speech and in his actions divine life force. And I feel that it's God that told him to curse. It's not God in the sense that he's hearing voices, he's schizophrenic. No, what David means is that when Shimei is talking, what I sense in him is godliness. I hear that words, the power of speech of man, is godly. Even when it's as contrary to my being as it could possibly be, because he's cursing me, he's wishing for my death. Yet still I'm able to hear within that the divine force that is animating him. And that is a tremendous accomplishment. And that's really what it means to be conscious of the divine. If I can be conscious of the divine in myself, that's one level. But being conscious of the divine outside is really, outside of myself, is really a whole different level. So what we just concentrated on was seeing the divine in speech of another human being. If we weren't looking at a human being, we would be looking at an animal, so we would be looking at their motion, the fact that they can move. If you see within the motion of an animal an expression of the divine, that's seeing the divine in an animal. In a plant, it's seeing the growth. If you can see the growth as something divine, that's sensing the divine in the plant. And when it comes to the rest of reality, we call it the fact that they're silent. Their silence, the silence itself, is an example. The silence itself is an example, is an expression of the divine life force inside the rock, the stream, whatever it is. If you can hear the silence of their being. So that was a second example about how it takes work to be able to feel something that is already inherently here in reality. All the more so when we're talking about the inherent goodness of all of reality. That takes work. And that's what we call conscious determination. It's a 4-stage process by which a person comes to recognize and be able to connect and see the inherent goodness within reality. So last time we began talking about the first stage, which is faith. And here we explained that we're talking about faith as a vision. So I'll read it again. Confidence, the ability. It's really confidence is what's driving this whole process. This process of opening the eyes. Opening the eyes and being able to see the goodness inherent in reality. not just to see it, but to bring it out, to make it expressed, to turn it into something that can be sensed, not just by myself, but by other people as well. So confidence is what's driving all of this. And we said last time that confidence in this sense is not netzach or hod. It's not the victory or acknowledgement, the active or passive confidence. It's what we would call the self-fulfillment, the self-confidence that's in the foundation. And we connected this last time to Abraham's circumcision. That the moment that he circumcised himself, he made it possible for his foundation to connect the heavens and the earth together, meaning to bring the heavens down into the earth, to show that the earth is a viable vessel for containing the infinite. That's really what he did when he circumcised. He was able to create a bridge between the divine and the mundane, between the heavens and the earth. Now, interestingly, before we get into this further, I have another point to make. If Abraham did it through circumcision, and that was the first mitzvah that Avram had received, then we can understand that all the mitzvos, all the commandments are in a sense a bridge between the heavens and the earth. And you may remember this, we may have talked about this, I'm sure we've talked about it at least once, may have talked about it a number of times. We were talking once about mitzvot as pillars that connect the heavens and the earth. There's like pillars of light, or they're like conduits, but they're holding them together. They're making sure the heavens remain the heavens and the earth remains the earth, but that there is a connection between them. Why pillars? So again, that's the image of something that's connecting the heavens and the earth. And according to the Zohar, there are 620 pillars. 620 is the value of Keter, the crown. Why 620? 613 plus 7 mitzvos of the sages, or 613 plus 7 mitzvos of the Noahide laws. In any case, the idea here is that every mitzvah is like Adam's first mitzvah. That all the mitzvot, their purpose is to connect the divine and the mundane. That's what all the mitzvot do. It's just that Adam, I keep saying Adam, I don't know why. It's just that Abraham's first mitzvah, circumcising the procreative organ, is symbolic of all the rest of the mitzvot. It's like this was chosen as the first mitzvah to be given to the Jewish people because it's called the power of the infinite. It's the power to reveal the infinite within the finite. Or we used that example before of tilling a field, of sowing a field. In the same way that the farmer sows the seeds into the earth, the procreative organ sows the seed into its partner, creating new life that grows out of it. So it's a very powerful image, this pillar. Each one of these pillars is like something that's bringing down the infinite light into reality and revealing it, making it grow within reality. But to do this is a process. And the process in this case has 4 stages, which we called faith, will, mind, and sight. So let's go now to faith again. Confidence is the ability to exercise freedom of choice in the psyche, and it begins with a clarification of one's vision of faith. A vision of faith is always directed at the future. And this we talked about a lot. It's always a picture of the future. It paints the future. That's why it's a vision of it. I try to picture what the future is going to look like. Regarding the past and even the present, there is no need for faith. Because faith, in the sense of something that brings the infinite into reality, is not needed. The more clarified the vision of faith, and here we talked about this, that clarity here means how much of the detail can I see in my mind's eye, the closer it comes to being carried out in practice. And the main example of this again comes from King David. He wasn't Zoche, he didn't merit to actually build the temple, but he made all the plans for the first temple. And here we said that we would talk about what the effect of faith has on the next stage, which is will. When King David finished making the plans, he decided to set out to actually build the temple. Meaning, the moment that the plan was clear, the vision was clear, the will kicked in. The will became something that could not be stopped anymore. As we say, En davar ha'omed bifnei haratzon. There is nothing that stands in the way of will. What was the story? The Talmud tells us that David, King David, and Samuel, the prophet, worked all night on the plans for the temple. What does it mean that they worked on it? They learnt the chapters in the book of Exodus about how to build the tabernacle. They learned the topography of this area that David knew even before he was shown by the angel, because he knew the area. He didn't know the exact location of the altar yet, but he knew the area on which the temple should be built, on Mount Moriah. There was a long tradition of where this mountain was, where Abraham had brought Isaac, and where Isaac went to pray, and where Jacob slept or prayed. And they worked on fitting the topography to the plans. What would be needed? What did we need to do in order to be able to build something like the tabernacle, but fitted for this topography here on this mountain behind David's house? It's just behind his house. That night, they finished the plans, and Samuel passed away. Shmuel Hanavi. He passed away. He was 52 years old when he passed away, and it was that night. In the morning, there can't be such a thing as there being no prophet. So Samuel's disciple, Nathan, took over Samuel's post as the prophet of the kingdom. And he had a prophecy in the middle of the night that he had to come to King David the next morning and to tell him that God says, you will not build the temple for me. Why? Why does he have to come first thing in the morning? That's what the prophecy said to him. The first thing you do tomorrow morning, before you daven, before you do anything else, if it was Rosh Hashanah, before you blow the shofar, you have to go to David and you have to tell him, Hashem says, you will not build the temple for me. Why? Because your hands are full of blood. Because of the wars that you fought. This is another topic in and of itself that we may have mentioned it once. You can't build the temple, says Nathan. So Rashi asks, why does it have to be first thing in the morning? Can't he come in the afternoon? Rashi answers, because the moment that David had his mind set on building the temple, he would start the first thing in the morning. He would hire workers, and with the first light of the sun, they would start digging. They would start building. And once he started such a mitzvah, it's not so simple to tell him to stop. So you have to tell him before the day starts, before he hires a single worker, you have to tell him that he cannot build this temple. That's what Rashi says. What does Rashi mean? Rashi means that the moment that a person has a clear vision of what they want to do, that vision transforms, it churns into will, into actionable will. A feeling that I have to do something. I have to do something about this vision that I have. So really, this is saying that if your vision is not clear, if it's not clarified, if it's not mevoral, if it doesn't have the fleshed out details, but most importantly, if you don't fully believe in it, which is another blemish, another form of a blemish in your vision, then you won't be able to transform the vision into will energy. You won't be able to make it into something actionable. You may still work on the fumes of excitement of planning itself. But to sustain action over time, effort over time and difficulties, requires will. And to foster the will, you have to have a clear vision. And like we said, especially a vision that is not clouded by doubt. Clarifying one's vision depends on it, and it depends on an ability to reject impurities in faith, which cause one to believe in superstitions. Superstitions mean that there is something other than God that is acting here. That's what superstitions are. That I am willing to entertain in my mind that there's some other force or other, call it, constellation of circumstances that I have to take into consideration, that has to become part of my vision. Superstition would be like, we talked about this last time, like a lucky shirt. When I do this, I have to wear my lucky shirt. There's something else that's responsible other than God for this happening. If I'm to succeed, I have this feeling that I have to knock my head on the door and turn around 3 times and laugh. Why? Because that's my superstition. There's something else at play here. Not just the Eibishter, not just God. The goal is for the vision to be as clear as a cloudless sky. Etzem HaShamayim LaTorah, it's called. Etzem HaShamayim LaTorah is one of the descriptions that Ezekiel gives of the divine chariot. That the chariot is going somewhere. And the vision was so clear of this chariot that it was like it was a crystal clear sky. The power of the psyche that clarifies the vision of faith is known as the power to recognize true words. Nikarim divrei emet. Where did this come from? Strangely enough, like many other things, this comes from a negative story. What was the story? That Samson went down to Gaza and he met there a Philistine woman. Her name was Delilah. And the Philistines, the Hamas of that time period, they had coached her into revealing, taking from Samson his secret about how he's so strong. And she tried a number of times to figure this out. I should probably read it directly from the scripture, as they say. I hope that's what they say. I have no idea. So, Samson went to Gaza. He saw there a harlot and consorted with her. It was said to the Gazites, I'm reading in Judges chapter 16. It was said to the Gazites, Samson has come here. So they went around and lay in wait for him all night at the city gate. They remained silent all night. They had an ambush for him. Thinking, by the dawn light we will kill him. When he goes back home, on his way home, we'll jump on him and we'll kill him. Samson slept until midnight. Here's another tzaddik who wakes up at midnight. He arose at midnight, probably to say Tikkun Chatzot, and grasped the doors of the city gate and the 2 doorposts and tore them out with the crossbeam and placed them on his shoulder. He brought them to the top of the mountain that faces Hebron. So he took them about 40 or 45 kilometers on his back. It happened, so he had put them to shame. Not only did they not ambush him, but he tore out their city's gates. So they were pretty upset with him. It happened after this that he loved a woman from Sorek, from the Sorek brook, meaning from Nachal Sorek. Her name was Delilah. The governors of the Philistines went up to her. The Philistines were a little bit further south, beginning in what we call today Kiryat Gat and Kiryat Ekron, and further south all the way down to Gaza. So the governors of the Philistines went up to her and said to her, entice him and find out by what means his strength is so great. Remember, we're getting to the idea of what does it mean to recognize true words, to recognize the truth when you hear it. That's why we're reading the story. So entice him and find out by what means his strength is so great, and by what means we may overpower him, so that we may bind him to afflict him. Each one of us will give you 1,100 pieces of silver. So Delilah said to Samson, please tell me what makes your strength so great, and how you could be bound to afflict you. Samson told her, if they bind me with 7 wet twines that have never been dried, I would become weak, and be like any other man. The governors of the Philistines then brought her 7 wet wines that had never been dried, and she bound him with them, and there was an ambush party sitting for her in the room. She said to him, Philistines are upon you, Samson. And he snapped the twines as flax straw snaps when it smells, as flax straw snaps when it smells fire. And his full strength was not even apparent, and they could tell that he was even stronger than that. Delilah said to Samson, Behold, you have mocked me and told me lies. Now tell me how you can be bound. He said to her, If they bind me up with new ropes, with which work was never done, then I would become weak and be like any other man. So Delilah took new ropes and bound him with them and said to him, Philistines are upon you, Samson. Oh, some kind of game. And the ambush party was sitting in the room. Samson snapped them off his arms like a thread. So that wasn't the right answer either. Then Delilah said to Samson, Up to now you have mocked me and told me lies. Tell me how you can be bound. He told her, If you weave the 7 locks of my head into a weaving rod, that's what will make me weak. So she fastened his locks with the peg of the loom. She said to him, Philistines are upon you, Samson. He awoke from his sleep and tore out the peg of the loom and the weaving rod. Nothing had happened. So she said to him, How can you say I love you when your heart is not with me? This makes 3 times that you have mocked me and not told me what makes your strength so great. It happened that after she tormented him with her words every day and pressed him, he became exasperated to death. So exactly how she did this, we will leave to other people's imagination. We won't discuss it here, but there's a long discussion about this. How she was able to bring him to a place where he was willing to pacify her. So he told her all that was in his heart and said to her, A razor has never gone up upon my head, for I am a Nazirite unto God from my mother's womb. If I would be shaven, my strength would leave me, and I would become weak and be like any other man. What happened? Delilah saw that he had told her all that was in his heart. So there was a lot of time since these ambushes were being set up in the other room in her house. Because nothing had happened, the Philistines had left. Remember, she lives in up north, a little bit further north, where the Gedera is today. That's Nachal Sorek. And the Philistines are nowhere near, so she has to go get them. She has to go fetch them. And she does. So she sent and summoned all the governors of the Philistines, saying, Come up this time, for he has told me all that was in his heart. So the governors of the Philistines came up and brought up the money in their hands. They already paid her. What question is being begged here? How does she know? He lied to her 3 times already. How does she know that this time he's speaking the truth? The sages say about this, Nikarim divrei emet. You can recognize true words when you hear them. A person knows. How can you know? That's a big discussion in Chassidus. But basically it means that there is a certain type of clarity when a person speaks the truth. A lot of times people say that the truth will set you free, or all kinds of idioms. But really, the truth is clear. It makes sense. So when you hear somebody who's speaking and making sense to you, you believe them. You feel that what they're telling you is true. And that's a big deal. When we search to clarify the vision of our faith, we have to believe ourselves. We have to know that we're speaking the truth. If I don't believe myself yet in what I'm envisioning, in what I would like to create, in what I would like to bring out in reality, then I'm still suffering from a lack of clarity of vision. You know, this is the most important thing that everybody who does any kind of entrepreneurship deals with. It's giving the mission statement, the vision. And you've got to pitch it. And you can only pitch something, you can only set the wheels in motion about something that you really believe in. You can't make up this thing. You just can't make it up. You can make it up, but you have to come to the place where you believe it so strongly that the moment that you begin to speak, it feels like light is coming out of your mouth. It's just clear. So you have to come to that point where you believe in it that much. And if you come to that point where you believe in it that much, then you can call it, sell this to the Philistines. And what are the Philistines? The Philistines, the Canaanim, these people, they're merchants. You can't sell them anything. They're the father of all merchants. They know everything there is to know about selling a product. So they see right through you if you're not speaking the truth. If you're not speaking the truth to yourself, then you're not going to be able to harness your power of will. The truth, the light that comes out of the truth, is transformed into will. This power examines the truthfulness of the parts of one's faith. This power to see whether I'm speaking the truth to myself. Truth that is destined to sprout out of the will. So you've got this infinite light that is now going to be contracted a little bit to fit into the vessel of will. Now this is a huge issue and topic that we'll talk about much later. But you have to know that going through these 4 stages, faith, will, mind, and sight, you can't take everything with you from the beginning to the end. Not everything that is in your vision of faith can be transported and transformed into will. There are things that will be left out. Because the light at the level of faith, the energy at the level of faith, is very, very spiritual. And the further you're going to bring it down in your conscious determination in this 4-stage process, the more concrete this light is going to become. This is a process that's known in the Arizal's Kabbalah as Mehitabut ha'orot nitavu kelim. From the thickening of the lights, the vessels were formed. The light that is in the crystal clear sky of the vision of faith thickens and becomes will. The will thicken and become intellect or mind. The mind will thicken and it will become sight. Not the sight, remember we talked about this, not the sight that's passive in the sense of just taking in reality, but we said the sight that comes out of the eyes, as it were, affecting reality. So relative to mind power, this type of sight is already very thick. It's much more concrete. It's something that has an influence on reality. It has an effect on it. There are two ways to talk about thickening. You can talk about it as just being more concrete. You can talk about it as becoming more contracted. Contracted here means that you've left some parts out. It's not contraction just in the sense of how thick it is or how rich it is. It's not just contracted in the sense of bringing everything together into a smaller place, making it more dense, if you want. Rather, there are elements of reality that, if you want to call it, naturally select which part of your vision of faith can actually be manifest in reality. Faith is infinite, and reality can't contain all of faith. So there are always parts that are left out. And the way you see that they're left out is very simply because they don't even transform into will. So this is a very natural thing. I'm saying this because it happens so much that when you envision the picture of what you want to do, it's much richer and bigger and wider than what you actually do want to do, what you actually start doing. There's a big difference between them. And you can't become disheartened by it. You can't become disheartened by the fact that not everything that you see in your vision can actually find its way into your will. There are some things that will be left out. And that's just how it works. We'll have to see more of this later, but I'm saying this already now to understand that when you work with somebody on these things, like what I usually do is when somebody comes to me and they have some kind of inability to flesh out their dreams. By the way, I'm the worst example of this because it's very hard for me to work on myself, but it's a lot easier for me to do it with somebody else. So I've been able to do it to some degree with myself, but really this is one of those things that you benefit the most when somebody does it with you. That's why coaching is so powerful, because we all need somebody to help us go through this process. It's just that regular coaching, if you go learn coaching somewhere else, they use all kinds of other techniques, but they don't have this 4-stage process. You could almost patent this 4-stage process. So when I start working with somebody, 1 or 2 sessions, what we do is we work on the vision. And what that means is I get them to close their eyes and just see what they want the finished product to look like. How they want the finished product to interact with their reality, with the reality of other people. Let's say it's a book. So, how long is it? What kind of paper do you want it printed on? These are important things. Do you want a hardcover or a soft cover? Do you want there to be illustrations or not? If you know anything about typesetting, can you tell me what font it's written in? Are you seeing it translated into other languages? What's the title? Even if you can't say the words, how many words are there in the title? Is it a colorful cover? Or is it just, is it leather bound? What is it? All these things, let's say you were writing a book, how many pages? How many pages is crucial. Is there an index? What do you see in this book? Where do you see it being housed? Do you see it in people's houses? Do you see them reading it by their bed? Do you see it being sold in bookstores? What kind of bookstores? Do you see it being just an online edition? What do you see about this? The more details, the more you can flesh them out, the more you can describe them, the more will be translated into your will. The less you can describe, the more fragile and limited your will is going to be. So really, when I start this process with people, I spend 2 or 3 sessions going over the same thing, and each time they notice new details, and I make them write them down and get their imaginary juices, their juices of their imagination flowing. But then there's this really important aspect in this picture, which is, can you see that all this is being done by God? Can you see that all this is the direct result of what God put into reality the moment He created it? What you're doing is you're bringing out something that already exists in a point-like state, in a undeveloped fetal state. And where is it? Where is it now? Part of it is in you, and part of it is in reality. And when you couple together, this will come out. So you have to see what this is. What do you envision? People are afraid a lot of times to think about the future. They're afraid to paint the future. Why are they afraid? For good reason. Because they've been burnt so many times. They've thought this, and it didn't work out. And they thought that, and it didn't work out. And all kinds of things happened, and they didn't work out. I mentioned last time Churchill's famous quote, "Success is the ability to move from failure to failure without a weak or without losing enthusiasm." So what? So what if it doesn't work out? This is our task as human beings. This is why Hashem gave us a brain. So that we can envision what we want. So that we can paint the future. You know, that the biggest and most important difference between animals and human beings is that animals can't see the future. They have no future. They have no ability to imagine what's going to happen. They fear the present, which is good. It's not bad. But our capacity is, as human beings, to speak about the future. And because of that, we can judge ourselves. We can decide we will do something, we won't do something. This is what makes us moral. Our ability to imagine the future. That if I do so and so, this will lead to the consequences that I don't want it to lead to. So I can be moral and I can decide not to do these things. We haven't talked about this enough yet, but really what we're doing through this whole process of faith and confidence is bringing the future into the present. We're taking from the future and bringing it into the present, which is really like saying that we're moving time. We're forcing time to move forward. by our actions, by our involvement, we create motion in time. When you think about an old movie, like movies used to be, with a strip of film, with many, many small pictures, the reason the movie worked was because you already had the future in your hand. It was just there, and eventually it would be fed through the projector. You were pulling the future into the present. That's what the concept of a movie was like. And when you do that, you create motion. You create life, as it were. Otherwise, for Hashem, the future exists anyway, but it's not alive. It's not alive yet. For Hashem, it's like looking at each one of the pictures in the movie reel, one after another, or one before, however you want, but they're static. What makes this movie into something that generates or that looks like live action? That pulling of the projector, pulling the reel, pulling the pictures through the light source, which is like the present. Taking the future, bring it. When you do that, you create life. You're creating motion. You're creating something in your life. If you don't do that, if you don't have a vision of the future, if you don't have pictures on that reel from 10 minutes from now, right now, imagine, again, the reel has to have the pictures that will be here in 10 minutes have to be on the reel already. The pictures that will be here in 20 minutes and in an hour, or in a feature length, which is in 2 hours, those pictures have to be on the reel already. They're already there. Somebody already drew them. Somebody already saw them. But when you pull it into the present, you're creating life. That's the difference between a human being, flesh and blood, and the soul when it's outside the body. Because when the soul is finally outside the body, after you live for 120 years, the world goes back to becoming like a movie reel. It's just pictures. There's no motion anymore. There's nothing alive anymore, in the sense that we understand something being alive. That's why it's our duty. That's why only a human being can do this. So you have to spend time picturing the future. You have to spend time pulling it into the present. That's how you create life. That's how you make life worth living. So don't be afraid to envision the future. The more you're able to determine what a crystal clear picture you have of your future, and again, whatever it is, the more you'll be able to create movement, you'll be able to create fulfillment. Self-fulfillment in this case. Fulfilling your goal, fulfilling your mission in life. This all comes as a result. Okay, so we're not going to get to will today. We just went over faith again. Hopefully this was a good review of this whole process. And really what I want to ingrain into our heads is these 4 stages. And that it's a process, that it takes work. Faith, will, mind, and sight. And it's coming from above to below. The faith is above the head. The will is still above the head. They're both in the 2 heads of the crown. And then the mind is already the intellect. It's already in the head. And finally it comes down to the eyes. So this is like exactly what God did when He created the world. He also had a vision of faith. And that vision created will. which is what we call Shiel B'atzmo B'choach Kol Ma She'atid Liot Before, which turned into Kol Yachol, which became his will, that he's able to do everything. And then from there it became the Chochmah and Bina of Adam Arishon, of Adam Kadmon, as it's called. And from there it became Vatipakachna Einehem, that their eyes were opened. Except that in the middle there was interference from the serpent, from the snake. But they were supposed to eat from the tree of knowledge in order to open their eyes, in order to make the world a good place. We'll talk more about this in the coming times. So, Shukoyach, if anybody has questions, now's the opportunity. You can open your microphones, or if you want to. Yes, Dina.
When we're talking about the pillars, and I have a wedding tonight, my granddaughter.
Mazal tov.
So I was thinking of the posts of the chuppah, and there are usually 4 of them. Does that make any sense? Well, I mean, a wedding is bringing God down to earth.
The chuppah is really the house of the chassan. It's called chupat chatanim.
Yeah.
And he's bringing his wife into his house. That's really what he's doing. So if that's bringing something from above to below, maybe. But you don't have to have 4 beams in a chuppah. A lot of times it's a gazebo. It's just something that stands. It could be a room. It could also be a closed room.
The roof also.
The point is that it can't be an open. Chuppah can't be open on top. It has to be closed, because it's supposed to be like, this is the minimal house that you have, like a sukkah without walls. Let's call it. Most is the the posts. If this is connected, I don't know. I have to think about how it would be connected. Say that. Okay. Anything else? Okay, so go dream. Go create a vision of faith. And we'll meet each other next time to learn how the vision of faith turns into willpower. Okay. Kol tov to everybody. Thanks for joining. It's great to see you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.